Good morning. It's a good thing I came out. Do you want to know why? My gypsy girl, the new little game hen, she got out and then she got panicked to get back in, and the chicken wire she stuck her head through and she wanted to get her whole body through. She was stuck. And so I had to work with her and sort of back her up and then help her through. And she's in again with the chickens all happy again. But I'm glad I was out here. And I, I decided, I talked about the wind, yes, in the other video. And I decided I would read some of this story if I can find. Anyway, there's one other story that I want to tell you about our wind in Idaho. And this was again up in the remote area of the Crane Creek. And there were cranes, and that's why it was called Crane Creek. And I love to watch them float on our pond. They looked like swans because they were white and they were big. And it was a neat to see them. At any rate, when we had our home built, and I told you about the metal roofing that got loose in the wind and cut my leg, and then of course we got it all installed and we're living there, and neighbor's son again was visiting with us, and the wind came up and we were all in the house, and all of a sudden it began to sound like a huge, like your washing machine when it gets out of balance and it goes that thump, thump, thump. And that's what it was like. And it was scary. I mean, we all didn't know what was going to happen. And I can remember I walked into the kitchen, and my kitchen had a lot of windows over the sink area. There were 3 windows. I even had windows over, well, anyway, lots of windows. And I looked out, and just as I looked out, a piece of our metal roofing flew off our roof and came down and landed at an angle in my front yard. And my front yard was all lined with perennial flowers that were blooming, and it just set down right on the grass and missed all of the flowers. And then we could hear still another piece start to rattle and do its thing, and then the wind blew itself out, and one piece was loose, but the second piece was loose but didn't come off, but that piece really came off. And the wind there would blow down barns and things like that. So we did have wind. And regardless of what people think about Idaho, it does have a certain amount of tornadoes in Idaho. Okay, now I'm just going to read part of the story so I'm catching up, but I want to read you about the wind. And this is all fictitious. It's about a rooster named Chanticleer. Okay, remembering the wind that had come up about 3 a.m. with such velocity that the hen house had shuddered on its foundation. The hens huddled together, closer together, as the gust of cold wind forced its way into every crack and crevice. All through the early dark dawn, the wind came in waves, each more powerful than the one before, blastering and blustering ever stronger and stronger. As dawn approached, Chanticleer started making his way to the door, which seemed to be heaving in and out, taking big breaths with the wind. Penny rushed up to him and asked, "You're not thinking of going out in this, are you?" "Well, of course. My crow is dependent upon. I must go forth. Winds or sleet, snows or rain, I must be there to call in the day." But use some reason, Chanticleer. No one could hear your crow over the roar of the wind, and you might be blown to who knows where. I think it would be foolhardy to go out now. You best stay put. Get thee behind me, old hen. I, Chanticleer, the rooster of the morning, must go out, do my duty, and crow. Saying thus, he pushed the door enough for the wind to grab it, fling it back against the house before it slammed the door shut again, leaving the hen stunned and shivering. Pity muttered, pompous old rooster, filled with self-importance but not much brain. As she found her spot again on the drafty roost, she sat listening for Chanticleer's crow, but hearing only the shrieking and screaming of the raging wind. Soon she began to doze off into a fitful sleep with the other clustered up hens. The only noises were that of the wailing wind tearing and ripping through the pre-dawn. The lights of the house began to come on, one here, one there. The radio turned to hear the weather report, or more like the wind report. The gale was reported to be hurricane velocity, ripping trees out, breaking branches, even scattering roofs hither and yon. Let's see, where am I? Okay. What of Chanticleer? Hutch. Okay, I'm going to skip part of it. No, I guess I can, or it wouldn't make sense. What of Chanticleer? Hunched up, he tried to make his way for the old rotted stump he perched on every morning to call forth the day and usher up the sun. Buffeted this way and that, he finally made it to the stump. Climbing into his crowing stance, he lifted his head to crow when a fierce gale caught him in the breast, lifting him up off the old stump and hurling him into the dawn. Chanticleer had no time to think. He could hardly breathe. He grabbed at the whipping branches of the hen yard, only to be carried a hen yard tree, to be carried beyond the grasp. The groaning and moaning wind tossed him up and down like a yo-yo, and then over and over in crazy somersaults, till he was most ill with dizziness. Then the fickle wind grew tired of this plaything and dropped him to the ground, rushed on to find new things to transport in its delirious strength, grabbing at weakened branches, sending buckets sitting on porches, clattering down driveways, whipping clothes off lines, tearing loose gates off their hinges, ripping shingles off the roof, and doing any other mischief it could do. Chanticleer slammed to the ground, losing all remembrance. He lay there as dead. Sometime in the interval he lay there, the wind rushed on to other places. In that other place it became a dignified breeze, as if over a bad temper tantrum it began slowing down. It had at last blown itself out. On our place on the Crane Creek, when we were building, we had an outhouse. And we had most of the house up, but no working bathroom inside the house yet. But it had some doors and whatnot. We were getting there. Anyway, I went down to the outhouse. It was a windy day. And I had a big dog named Sadie. She was, you would have loved to have seen her. And anyway, Sadie and I went down, and this was before Maggie, went down to the outhouse. She always went with me. And we got in the outhouse, and the outhouse was shuddering in the wind. And I said, Sadie, it's not safe here. And we left. We got up to the house, and I remember getting up to the house. The house didn't really have good doorknobs yet. They had doors, and I had to think it was, oh, I got in, but it, anyway, I just barely got to the door and I looked around and the outhouse was sailing off into the next county. And I was so glad I wasn't in it. I would have been like Dorothy with Toto. So Sadie and I were safe in the house, and that's when I had to push for all I was worth to get the door to stay shut so the wind didn't whip through the house and bring all the stuff with it that it was blowing up. So that's my story about that I wrote, but also the story of what really happened. So I hope you don't have a wind today that blows you away. Here we have breezes. Once in a while we'll have a sort of a gale, but nothing. I always joke here, we have climate here. In Idaho, you had weather, and whether you wanted it or not, and it was always changing. And they always said, well, if you don't like the weather, just wait about 3 minutes and it'll change. So that's my story, and you have a good day, and thank you for coming.